Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the conservation podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and I can't believe it, but we're halfway through already. It's time for the 4th episode of Pangolin Pride, our series highlighting the voices and stories of the LGBTQ+ community in the conservation space. This week, we're taking it slow. No, we're not. We aren't really. We're talking about an animal which is known for its slowness. Its choice to be slow, in fact. The sloth. And I'm so excited because it's been a long time coming for this one, and I am so grateful. I'm so grateful that we finally get to talk about it. Helping us tell the story of the sloth is the absolutely wonderful, the charming, the fantastic, the brilliant, the insightful, the actually probably one of the most intelligently specific, like the intelligence and depth of intelligence so this person has around sloths, without saying their name because I don't want to spoil the surprise until I get to it, is incredible. And the person is, what a rambling introduction, the wonderful Andrés Bräutigam. He's amazing, and he will teach us about how these wonderful, amazing animals evolved, what makes them special, and how we can help to protect them. He'll also discuss the day-to-day challenges of being a wildlife vet, which are really, really interesting, and what it's like to work with such a diverse array of species. Everything from kind of like tapirs to crocodiles are coming across his desk to be dealt with, and it's just amazing. And I can't believe somebody can have so many skills to deal with so many different things that are so vastly different, and it's just so amazing. And having said all that, I've built him up quite a lot, and I can't live up to his work and his amazingness, so I will let him talk. And so without further ado, let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I am now joined by Andrés Bräutigam, the veterinary supervisor at the Toucan Rescue Ranch, who is here today to talk about, I think it is fair to say, his one true love, which is the sloth. I'm so excited to talk about it. I like I followed you on Instagram for so long. I have loved every content, every picture, every wonderful thing I've seen of your work. And I'm now so excited to get to pick your brains about this amazing creature. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you.
Well, it's lovely to be here, and yeah, you said it best. It's the love of my life, my siren in the mist, and I love sloths, and I'm here to talk about them.
Yes, and I am so excited because I think, yeah, it's been a long time coming, as I've said, of like, I have this list of people who I want to have on the show, and we get to them all eventually. And your name has been on that list for far too long. And so now to have you here to talk all about this is so exciting. And yes, I guess, like, as I said, I'm kind of familiar with what you do. I'm familiar with your job and the things that you do, and I see the pictures online. But I think it would be good to get us started if, I guess, you introduce yourself a little bit more. I gave you a brief introduction there, but yeah, let me know, let the listeners know, who are you? What is it you do? Yeah, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, so like you said, I am Dr. Andres. I work over in Costa Rica. I'm Costa Rican born and raised, and I've worked with wildlife for around 10 years. But as a vet, I've worked with wildlife for around 2 years. Before that, I was just doing my undergrad and all that, still working with wildlife, but finishing my education. And
Mhm.
during those 2 years, I've served as the veterinary supervisor at a small rescue facility in Costa Rica called the Toucan Rescue Ranch. But I also work with wildlife everywhere in the country. So I offer myself as an advisor in anything that has to do with sloths. In currently, I think it's around 6 or 7 facilities around the country, and any wild animal that I can look at, I'll go and look at. So I've worked with basically most mammals that you can find here in Costa Rica, most big mammals, definitely not the 190 species of bat that we have in the country, um, but a little bit of everything that way.
And I think that's how you like. I guess that's how you keep me hooked on looking and watching everything you do because you don't only have the sloths. You have, of course, and work with one of my favorites, which of all time, which is of course the tapir, pops up occasionally in your work, which we've done a whole episode about already. We don't need to double back on. I won't take away from the sloths moment, but yes, I think that is fantastic. Just seeing like all of the little things that pop up and like little or very big things that pop up, and I'm always like, this boy must be an absolute because there's like he must be a genius or must be very, 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 very good at what he does because like the the transition of like sloth to tapir to large reptiles to all sorts of amazing things that I see pop up that you're working with, I'm always so just like blown away by. Like, I guess, yeah, it must be exciting not quite knowing what you're going to be dealing with on a day to day. Is that like part of it, or are you kind of like at this point, I could do anything?
I would definitely not say that I can do anything, but it is very exciting and it's very terrifying because
Mhm,
at this point I've worked with every major group of vertebrates. I've worked with fish, and that
mhm,
includes also I've worked with like manta rays and sharks. I've worked
mhm,
with amphibians, and I've worked with of course birds, reptiles, and mammals, and I've done some invertebrate work as well. So like I have some of my bases covered, but all of a
mhm.
sudden somebody will be like, "Hey, go over here. There's a Komodo dragon," and I'll be like, "Oh, I guess that's my Tuesday today."
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I feel like that's like it's all kind of put together. Everything that is kind of put together in the same way as a sloth, kind of, maybe, kind of.
Sort of, yeah. If you know an animal, you know
Mm.
all of them. Like it's most of them have a heart. A lot of them have lungs.
Mhm. I like how you even had to caveat that. Like, not all of them have lungs. Not all of them have this. Not all of them have that. Like, we're already getting flaws in this system. Um, no, but like that's amazing, and I guess it leads me to a question that I kind of ask everybody. Is like, why when you are working with such before we talk about them exclusively, I want to know why, like, when you work with such a huge range of animals, all sorts of things as we've talked about, why sloths? Why are they the focus? Why are they the love? Why are they the thing that you always come back to? What is it that draws you into the world of the sloth?
That's a good question. Actually, it's a bit complex. Growing up here in Costa Rica before the sloth boom, hashtag sloth boom, we used to believe wildly that sloths were just very uninteresting animals before they became like this pop culture icon. And while I was growing up, they were considered to be kind of ugly and boring and just nobody wanted to deal with them. And I was raised in that manner as well. I barely knew what a sloth was when I became of age, and started working more in the conservation field. And what drew me to them was that like if you want to work with big cats, not to depreciate the people that work with them, there's books on the topic. There's hundreds upon hundreds of books and information, and the London Zoo has kept big cats since literally the annals of history. So they've been studied. They've been studied, and they've people know about them. These animals, they're so big, they're so colorful, they're so bright that everybody knows about them. Everybody has written articles on their physiology and anatomy, and there's like everything to know about them. But when I started learning about sloths, I realized that there were these not even huge holes, but gigantic holes in what people's knowledge about this animal was. And even when they started becoming popular, and to this day, even though the most common, or yeah, even though the only basically species of sloth in captivity in the world is the genus Coloepus, the two-toed sloths, specifically the Linnaeus two-toed sloth, because I believe, for example, in the UK, I think there's only one couple of Hoffmans in the entirety of the UK, and Linnaeus are far more common. They're the ones that you have at London Zoo and Chester Zoo as well. People don't know that they're Linnaeus two-toed sloths. People don't know that they are two-toed sloth. They assume that they're the same caricature that they see for a three-toed sloth, and that means that people just don't know anything about them. And because they don't know anything about them, I want to know about them so that I can teach people
Mm-hmm.
about them because they're very, very important animals, and that's what drew me to the sloth.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a beautiful answer, and I think a very good answer, right? And I think it's like kind of justifies. And like I think I've had this a couple of times recently where we've talked about species on the show where people probably think they know them, right? They think they knew the giraffe when we did that episode. They think they know the gibbon. We have an episode about gibbons that has come out recently. Like they think they know these things because they see them in zoos or they see them on TV and they're kind of like, yeah, they're these interesting things. But when it comes to things like those animals and like the sloth, the portrayal in pop culture and the portrayal in these things only really scratches the surface of what they are, and like there's so much more there to them. And I think that what makes them so interesting and such a perfect fit for the show, just to justify the underappreciatedness of the sloth, because you all love them. I know that when you're listeners, I know you love them, but there is so much more to them that I think we all know, and I think that makes them so exciting.
I think.
I guess it also.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
sorry. No, I think it's also a matter of like of what they are and like pride. It's um it's very interesting, but one of the things that I'm fascinated by is the biases that we've had as a collective species in regards to the study of biology and specifically veterinary medicine, veterinary science, because of who we are and how we have evolved as a species. So obviously, I come from Costa Rica, which is a country that was colonized by Europe, and the animals that we keep here in Costa Rica as essentially just livestock or pets are the animals that you would normally see. We have dogs, we have cats, we have horses, we have cattle, we have some goats and sheep, pigs, of course. But what all of these animals have in common is that they're animals that have evolved in Europe or Asia or Africa, things like hens as well, and they were brought over due to colonization to the New World, and they have established populations over here now. But those are the animals that we learn from or about in veterinary medicine school when you're learning about them, and you're not really learning about the incredible biologies of the animals that have been born and raised in the Americas. We don't learn about the animals that were actually like the original American animals that have evolved within the Americas and like diversified here. Sloths used to be one of the most biodiverse groups of animals to ever roam the earth, and people don't know anything about them because we have bothered to learn so much more about the animals that grew up in the environments where we evolved as a species and that grew alongside with us during our period of evolution before colonization.
Hmm. That's really really interesting and something that like I think yeah it's not something that gets talked about really at all. It and is something that must make it really kind of yeah challenging and interesting and add such a level of kind of like especially when you're trying to engage people, I guess not just tourists who come and visit, you're also trying to engage people who are from Costa Rica, have grown up there, and might like the way that the history and everything is portrayed and told and educated about, like that must be a really complicated, challenging dynamic to work with. Like that's really, really yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that because it's something that I don't think we've talked about ever on the show before, and I think it's really, really important to kind of highlight. Really, really important.
Yeah,
Um,
being
and I guess it might.
oh sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, it's just super interesting to me, like this whole topic, because I think currently as it stands, I am one of the very few, if not the only, expert in sloths that comes from a home country that actually has sloths. We have some people that have been studying sloths a lot, but they're from countries. They generally come from countries that don't have sloths, and they move to Costa Rica or to Brazil, and they start studying them over there. And I'm one of the very, very few people, I'm very privileged in that fact, that grew up in a country that has sloths and is currently studying sloths. So they're fascinating animals, and they represent a point of like cultural heritage that's really, really important, and that, in my opinion, should be really brought up for Latin America as these animals that are emblematic to our area of the world. Just like lions, are often brought up in African countries as a point of pride. I feel like sloths and the small marsupials that we have here, Sinarthrans in general, like they're such a big part of our cultural heritage.
I think that's really fantastic. Really, yeah, it's really, yeah. That's a really interesting point, and like something that, like, yeah, I can see exactly now why you would love them so much and want to talk so much about them. And I am, yeah, I'm so excited to learn more about them from you. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and I think it actually leads nicely into that discussion, right? Of like, they are something that should be celebrated. They are something that should be known about, and you should like there should be very, very like proud of having these amazing, unique, brilliant, wonderful things. And like, so I guess, would you like to, having introduced yourself, having introduced your love for this other character that we're discussing, we should give them their moment in the sun, in the kind of spotlight. And yeah, I wonder, could you introduce the sloth to us, I guess, or reintroduce to, I guess, to some people who probably think they know everything.
Well, it's really hard to be able to describe a sloth, right?
Hmm.
I always go back to when I was a young guy. I remember we used to, like, in, I think it was like Spanish class, something like that. We learned about the ancient tale of like three blind monks trying to describe an elephant, and so one of them would touch the trunk and be like, "This is like the trunk of a tree," and this is like whatever, and describing a sloth feels a lot like that. Sloth is many things. I remember taking a course on sloth nutrition a while back, and the thing that they said is like a sloth is like a lizard, and a little bit like a marsupial, and a little bit like a mammal, but a little bit like a something else. And that's generally what a sloth is. A sloth is a mammal, right? So we have an animal that has hair and mammary glands. Um, and they carry their babies not in a pouch, as a lot of people actually believe, but rather inside their bodies. They're placental mammals. But they're very well characterized because of their very slow metabolism. And a lot of people think about, when they think about sloths, they think about them being slow. And having a slow metabolism and being slow are totally different things. Sloths can move quickly if they want to, which is one of the most deceptive things that people have. Um, and apart from that, they are frugivorous animals, so they eat mostly just leaves. They live up in trees and hang from them, which is a very odd mode of locomotion, not something that a lot of animals have. And they're also very well known because they have multiple stomachs that allow them to digest their food. But that's basically all that sloths have in common. We currently, as it stands, have about seven different species of sloth in the world, two of two-fingered sloth or two-toed sloth, and then five of three-fingered sloth or three-toed sloth. And they share very little characteristics between themselves. Like I said before, sloths are some of the most, or used to be some of the most biodiverse groups of animals, period. Meaning that, about 10,000 years ago, the diversity of sloths was so high that it would rival the diversity of wild cats we have nowadays. And so, two-toed sloths and three-toed sloths, well, we just kind of just lump them together and call them sloth. In reality, they are animals that have about 12 million years of evolution between them, which is a lot more than we have, that is between us and our closest living ancestor. So they're animals that have a different number of chromosomes. They're completely different from one another, and they could not interbreed even if they wanted to, which they don't.
That's that is amazing. I did not know just quite how distinctly different those two like strands of these. That's really amazing and interesting and, yeah, bizarre, and like, yeah, I guess then. There's, you know, that way where I'm like, I guess then, and then my brain overwhelmed with 100 different questions I want to ask about all of these different things. Like, that's incredible. And I guess, like, what does so are there distinct, really quite distinct differences between the two? Because I guess, yeah, as you say, most people will lump these things all together and go, oh, they're just sloths. But what kind of really pulls those two apart, I guess, in 12 million years? Like, what has happened in that time?
Well, one of my favorite fun facts about sloths is has to do with tigers, and I know that's really weird, but we call lions and tigers completely different names because we think that they are completely different animals. Externally, you would see a lion and see the mane, and you're like, "Oh yeah, of course that's a lion." And you see a tiger, and you see the stripes, and you're like, "Oh, of course that's a tiger." But if you look at them anatomically, they're basically the same animal. Now with sloths, though, we call them both sloths, and they're completely different. They have almost nothing in common between them. One of the main characteristics that I can tell you about is three-toed sloths are sexually dimorphic, meaning that males and females are different from one another. In the cases of the pale-throated, the pygmy, and the brown-throated three-toed sloth, which are the ones that I have or that are more commonly found, um, they all have basically like a spot of bright orange on the back of their back that differentiates male from female. And in the case of maned sloths, which are two species that we have in Brazil, they have a mane. The males have a mane. So like even with lions, they're pretty different. Um, and in the case of two-toed sloths, I mean, they're just fully different. They first of all, if we're going in this characteristic, they're not sexually dimorphic. So it's very hard to tell a male and female apart unless you know what you're doing. But other characteristics like differences in organs, three-toed sloths have less organs than two-toed sloths do, which is very interesting. They don't have a gallbladder, for example. Two-toed sloths do have that. The numbers of vertebrae that they have, like two-toed sloths have six vertebrae in their necks, five to six, and three-toed sloths usually have more than nine, which means that three-toed sloths have very long necks and two-toed sloths have very short necks, and you can tell, you can see it very easily. So even in the most banal of things, they're very different from one each other, including, I don't know, three-toed sloths are spotted. A lot of people don't know that, but they have spots all over their body. Not rosettes like a lion, like a leopard or a jaguar, but rather spots, kind of like your Dalmatian. And you can appreciate them very easily if they're not covered in green. But most images that we get from sloths aren't. They're usually covered in green, and that means that you cannot see their spots, which is very sad. If you go to Zootopia or Zootropolis, however you call it abroad, you'll see that the sloth over there, Flash, doesn't have spots, and he should have spots, and he should have a bald spot on his back that's bright orange. But obviously, common media representation makes of these animals it's very hard.
Yeah, I think I, as a joke, like the other day when we were messaging about this episode, said that like hashtag justice for sloths, in that like I haven't had them on the show yet and they need their time in the spotlight. I feel like this hashtag needs to become a thing, and Disney or Pixar, whoever made that film, needs to come like speak to you and reanimate certain sequences, or if they make a sequel, which I'm sure they will, make two or three sequels about these like these franchises. Like yeah, they need to alter that immediately and get it all correct. um and yeah, I guess that actually has reminded me of something you said, because of course the famous scene in from that film is like the sloth moving exceptionally slowly, and in the like, I think it's in the like DMV equivalent of like the, but like something you said a second ago, like when we were talking, was like there's a difference between being slow and having a slow metabolism, I think is
Yes.
what you said. And I think that's something else that is really interesting and should be picked up on, I guess, a little bit. Could you expand a little bit more on what you meant by that? Because I guess, like, yeah, like myself and listeners are probably thinking, yeah, sloths, slow. That's what they're known for. But like, probably more deep and complicated than just sloths equal slow. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, of course. The slow lifestyle of a sloth is an active choice. That's extremely important for people to realize. They don't move slow because that's the only speed that they can go. They're not like some sort of snail that roams around the world moving like that. No, they can actually move quite quickly if they want to. The problem is getting a sloth motivated enough to want to move fast. Um, I work mostly with two-toed sloths, and two-toed sloths will move fast if they want to. Um, for a couple of very specific things. For example, defending their territories, which they're very, very, very territorial and very individualistic animals. And so if they see another sloth entering their territory, more like smell another sloth, they'll actually go and fight it. And it's not a slow mo fight, they'll actually go for it. The other thing is finding mates. Of course, they'll move really quickly if they want. Um, a mate. And the other thing that they can do really quickly is, where they can move really quickly, is if it's raining. Sloths really hate the rain, and so they'll move really quickly to try to avoid it if they can. In the case of three-toed sloths, they can move a little bit, not too fast, but certainly a lot faster than the way that they're represented in comic media. Um, but yeah, the thing with sloths is that they eat the worst source of food that the universe has ever invented, which is leaves. Leaves suck.
Mm-hmm.
Leaves are the worst source of food ever. But because they're the worst source of food ever, nobody wants to eat leaves. And that means that there's plenty for animals like sloths to be able to eat. And so by having that niche kind of colonized, um, and monopolize, really, there's nothing that will go and try to steal that away from them. They won't compete against anything, and so they have the ability to be able to survive in conditions where other animals just won't. But that means that they have to eat bad things like leaves. um, Eating grass is great because grass is fantastic, but eating leaves from trees is really, really hard. And you have to be very, very specialized to be able to eat it. Those leaves, they have a lot of toxins, a lot of chemicals, just naturally to protect them from predation from herbivorous animals. And they also have a ton and a ton of fiber that's not digestible. And so sloths need to have really a lot of stomachs that are very big to be able to digest those by passing them through a bacterial filter, and the bacteria eat those leaves and transform them into something that then sloths will digest. It's very easy like that. But that means that they're always running at a loss. They're not eating leaves, not really. They're eating bacterial feces that give them their energy. So they have to feed their little aquarium that they have in their stomachs for them to be able to generate energy for them. And so they're always at a loss. And so for a sloth, they always have that, that like Sims 3 energy bar right here in the back of their brain of
Mm-hmm.
like, I shouldn't use too much energy. I need to preserve it because if I use too much energy, I'm gonna have to eat leaves for the next 4 days nonstop. So I have to be wise, like the sloth, and realize that okay, now is the moment to go and fight. And then that's very important. I need to do it. I'm gonna move fast. I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna stop, and then I'm gonna eat leaves for the rest of the day and sit in a good spot of sunlight and sunbathe to regulate my digestive system and be chill. But their slowness is an active choice.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's something we can all learn from Sloth there. I think there's a very important lesson for us all of like choose your battles, choose when you need to push yourself, and choose when you know you need to just eat your leaves, sit in the sun, have a moment to yourself, relax, don't push yourself. That's really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. Because yeah, I think yeah, I guess for me and for a lot of people probably assumed, well, that's just them. That is the way that they're meant to be, as these slow, slow things. And like, yeah, I don't know. An important thing for us all to take away, I guess. A very, very important thing. Um, I guess like I feel like your brain is probably filled with a million more facts about sloths. And so I was gonna move on to talk a little bit about sloth conservation, some of the threats that they face and some of the work that maybe you have to do with them. But like I wondered, before we move on to that topic, any last minute things that the listeners should know? I mean, last minute, I could probably leave you on the recording. I'll go and make a cup of tea, like have a nice chill for an hour and just let you monologue and let me listen and learn everything. But like, if there was a couple more things, is there anything else you want to drop in before we move on to conservation stuff?
I think one of the things that people are not really aware of is a lot of people think that sloths are monkeys, and they are not monkeys. Their closest living relatives are actually anteaters, which is really, really interesting. And that goes back to the slowness thing because anteaters don't really have a metabolic rate that's that much higher from a sloth, and they gallop and move around and are constantly like being very, very active animals. So that always has surprised me of like where people, I mean, people don't get that they're related. I get that, but it's very interesting for sure. They're incredible animals.
I think that's, yeah. And we have, of course, listeners who do not know anything about anteaters. I think one of my first ever episodes, like, I think we did one about giant armadillos and one with about giant anteaters, both with the same organization. And so, yes, you should go back and like listen to those and give the armadillo one some love too. Even though we haven't mentioned them too much, go back and give the armadillo one some love as well. Because yeah, all of these animals are incredible and amazing. And yes, I think, yeah, a good way for good for bringing that up because it means I can plug some of the other things we've chatted about. So no, that's fantastic. Then yeah, really, really interesting. And again, unexpected, which I think is just the theme of this episode is just unexpected twists from an animal that is bizarre and wonderful. Like I appreciate that from them quite a lot. Um no, but I guess like as we always say on the show, and as like unfortunately I always have to say over and over again, is that being bizarre and being interesting and being having all of these millions of years of evolution to get to the point where you are perfectly designed to eat your leaves and sit in the sun does not protect you from everything and does not mean that you are invincible to threats from outside. And that does mean, unfortunately, that sloths, like all of the animals and things we talk about on the show, are threatened and there are conservation issues that they face. And I think it's really important to talk about these things, right? And so I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about maybe some of the major threats that sloths face. And yeah, and then we can go on to talk about what we can do and what some of the kind of, yeah, responses to those threats are as well. So do you want to start with maybe some of the major threats that sloths face?
Hmm. I mean, if I had to summarize the major threats
Hmm.
that sloth face, I can say it in two words:
Hmm.
human beings.
Hmm.
That's it.
Hmm.
um,
Yep.
it's it's very simple, but sloths here in the tropics. There was a study done a couple years back that said that sloths are the most common mammal by biomass of the tropical ecosystems. That means that they are by far one of the most numerous in the types of ecosystems where people like me live in. In the rainforest, that's what you'll find, and often you'll find sloths in very high concentrations here as well. Sloths are very successful animals. They're extremely, extremely well built, tailor built to do what they do, which is eating leaves and sitting in the sun. Sometimes fighting each other, but that's also a thing. But they have faced so many problems from human interaction. Everything from electrocution, crossing roads, even inbreeding from being isolated to small populations because of isolation by humans or cutting rainforest, and even well, pets. One of the biggest problems that sloths are facing right now is comes from interactions with not necessarily humans directly, although that is a problem as well, but rather interactions with humanity's best friends, dogs, cats, although mostly dogs. They can carry diseases to sloths like distemper or rabies. Well, rabies kind of, mostly just distemper. They can carry scabies and other sorts of mite-like infections for them, and they can attack them. And while sloths, like two-toed sloths, for example, can defend themselves very well from a dog attack, killing the dog on the way, um, that's still an animal that will severely face severe consequences from interacting with something like a dog that shouldn't have been there, because dogs are not native to the Americas. Um, and And that's a problem. Those are all extremely, extremely big problems. Other problems that sloth face include elimination of their natural predators, which has made it so that their populations have boomed here in Costa Rica. And in doing so, we see a lot more of, of sloth human interaction, which is almost always negative because there's no real predation of sloths in the wild anymore because their only predators have been exterminated. And then existing within the interface of sloth human interactions is urbanism. Sloths live in Costa Rica, they live in urban spaces, which is something that contrasts everywhere else in the world, where, for example, in Brazil, sloths are most always just found outside of human realms of influence. But here in Costa Rica, and we don't understand why, sloths are found in cities and they're found in like quite urban like environments. Um, and that has led for people to just take them from the wild, to put them in people's hands, which is really bad, and a wide variety of other things. Popular culture, Saw's biggest enemy, for real.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's something that has come up a lot on the show recently. Like we've talked about gibbons, which faced this kind of pet trade and this popularity as photo props. We've talked about chameleons, which, like again, like people like to have kind of popped up on, like they popped up on a shelf in their home as like a pet, and like, but then not fully understanding where those things come from and how they kind of need to be treated and interacted with, and like again here, like these kind of interactions with people, whether it be for kind of a multitude of reasons. Like there's so much going on there that I think is really really interesting, and it raises so many questions, so many questions for me. Like I guess like if we go back to one of the first things you talked about first, I think what's really interesting and what you talked about was obviously like this, like dogs being this kind of like in people's minds, man's best friend, the dog, like it's this wonderful thing. A lot of people love dogs. A lot of people have pet dogs. A lot of people listening to this maybe on a dog walk with their beloved. Like it feels weird to think about these things as a problem, right? And like it's something that we need to be not necessarily worried about all the time, but something that like, interacts with wildlife, whether it be in Costa Rica or whether you're listening to this in the UK or the US, your dog and pets and things will interact with native wildlife. And I guess then because there is this connection between humans and their pets, how do you go about tackling this thing? Because I imagine like when you say to people, you love this animal, you need this animal maybe for work on a farm, you need this, whatever reason you have this animal, you need it and you love it or you want it there, but it's a threat to these other animals. How do you begin to like deal with that kind of tension? Because I imagine it's not an easy conversation to have, right? Like it can't be. Yeah.
It's hard. It's honestly, it's really, 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 really hard. People, if a sloth kills your German Shepherd, which has happened and I have seen it, um, they don't blame the German Shepherd. They blame the sloth, and they gain this idea of like, this is a horrible thing that this animal has done to me and my property and my friend and my family, and approaching and broaching the idea of education for that person has now become so much harder, and that is a huge issue. Here in Costa Rica, we have a lot of problems with education to the population, and that's one of those things. The culture here is you have your dog in your backyard, you let it roam, you let it free, it does whatever it wants, and kills however many birds it kills. It eats however many lizards it wants to eat. It kills however many sloths it wants to kill, because this is its space, this is my space, and I don't give the right for wildlife to exist within my design and the limited space, and that has become a huge issue. We have to tackle it from the bottom a lot of the time of responsible pet ownership, of of this is a bad habit to have. You shouldn't have your dog just roaming around and doing whatever it wants. In less urban places here in Costa Rica, people have communal dogs. They have a dog that lives in this house today and then lives in that house tomorrow, and then they just walk around the neighborhood and they're fed by everybody. Not taken to the vet by everybody. That's important. They're fed by everybody. And those are the animals that usually have a lot of diseases, often continue with the problem because they reproduce recklessly and create more puppies that will become dogs that will exacerbate the problem. Dogs often have a lot of puppies. It's not just one or two. And so tackling that from the bottom of like going to your school, going to people's schools and talking to them about responsible pet ownership, how to take care of these animals in an appropriate way, what a dog should eat and shouldn't eat. Where a dog, dogs need exercise, but maybe you should go and exercise with the dog, not let the dog be free and then come back at night. All of those things are very, very important and tackled better from youth than talking to an adult that is completely set on their ways.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's really really interesting. And it like, is that how you would say? I guess because the problem, right? I guess is like that is not the problem, but the the thing that makes that complicated is obviously like that is if you target the younger generation and you talk to them and you educate them, you then have to wait 10, 15, 20 years before they're in the position to have that responsibility and kind of look after the dogs and look after these things and make sure that those interactions happen in a more positive and safe way. And so do you find that you are often kind of like, okay, I'm in it for the long game here? Or like, are you hoping then that the kids go home and say to their parents, oh, like, why are we doing this? Why should, maybe we could try that? Like, is it a bit of both? Like, what's the kind of thought process there, I guess?
It's certainly both.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's a lot easier to listen to your own kid than it is to listen
Hmm.
to somebody who's just being like, "I really like sloths."
Yep.
Um, but it's also, yeah, that we just kind of have to be in it for the long haul. Um, there's a there's a couple other things that can be done, obviously, in that educational framework. Communities that enjoy a lot of heightened tourism because of sloths tend to protect their sloths more and try to contain those things that would cause risk to the sloth. Because obviously, like if you're in a community in a coastal town here in Costa Rica, and people are going to that community with the expectation of seeing sloths around the community, if they see a disemboweled sloth on the street, they're not going to leave with the image of happy Costa Rica. They're going to live with the image of sloth killers. And that means that the communities have a little bit more of a stake in it and more of a role of a collectiveness into educating themselves and protecting the species. But that is a double edged sword, sadly, because a lot of these communities then have also taken to grabbing sloths and putting them in sloth gardens where they just take them away from the wild, put them in somebody's garden, 10 sloths in one single tree until they kill each other for their territory, um, because they are protecting them. They're doing what we tell them to do, which is protect them from the dogs, but they don't understand that that's not really what we mean either. It's complicated.
Hmm. And I guess that links into kind of a lot of the other issues, right? That we were talking about, like finding these animals in urban spaces, finding them in, like, I guess, like, yeah, with the electrocution, with all of these things, does it always come back to this education, right? And making sure just everybody and anybody you can talk to about sloths, you do talk to about sloths and you try and get this knowledge more embedded in as many people as possible? Is that kind of how you would I'm not saying that there's a one size fits all solution to these sloths problems because there will be certain things that differentiate between them. But is that kind of your main approach to dealing with a lot of these issues? Is the education aspect?
Yes, certainly. I think it's also a matter of, like what I said in the very beginning, the reason or the way that I fell in love with sloths is because I realized that nobody knew anything about them. I realized that I could bring something to the table. I realized that they were an animal that was uniquely from my area of the world, and that was something that I, as an individual from this area of the world, could bring to the world. So I think building into communities that sense of identity of this is a resource here in Costa Rica. These are our sloths. Obviously, it takes a long time, But building that into our cultural identity as a country is probably one of the easiest ways to continue doing that, because the more, the next electrical engineer that's growing up and building power lines in our country understands that sloths are important, the more likely they are to take means to be able to mitigate the damage that the electrical company that he's working for is doing to the animal that he really loves and he really feels is a Costa Rican icon, kind of, if that makes sense.
Mhm. No, that makes perfect sense, right? Because it's like this thing of like, and I guess for me, like, it's something that I think about a lot, right? Is this like here in the UK, because we have lost quite a lot of our like what would be considered the iconic species of the UK. There's no wolves, there's no lynx, there's no not an. It's really hard, right, with a number of these things that are already gone. Like the species that we do have that have been reintroduced, or otherwise, like I think things like the capercaillie, things like you have the beavers that are being reintroduced and stuff. I'm always like, guys, whenever these come up, these are Scottish, amazing, wonderful things. We should like put them at the fore. They are the most incredible, wonderful, bizarre things. Like I know we all love tigers and lions and giraffes and elephants and all this sort of stuff. Like we love them, but also we have these things right here and they're amazing. So we need to kind of like, I don't know, try and make people fall in love not just with conservation in a way that's like, oh, far away and removed, but also the things that we have and can have that kind of pride in as well of like, oh, these are our like amazing things that live here. Like we should cherish them and get their name out there as much as we can, as alongside the icons that everybody quite rightfully loves, like whales or like lions or whatever it is. Like I think it's really, really, really important, and I think yeah, it's really, really interesting, really, really interesting. Um, I guess it also like leads me to a question of like, so this like obviously that's kind of like very internal within Costa Rica. That's a lot of work that has to go on and a lot of kind of pride building and education and all of these things. If people listening, I imagine quite a lot of the listeners are not sat in Costa Rica right now, being like, "Oh, this is amazing." A lot of them will be sat all around the world thinking, "I love these guys. What can I do?" What are some of the things that you would say to people outside of the kind of Costa Rican setting? Like, what can I and everybody else be doing if we're not there?
It's actually pretty. It's not easy, but there's a really easy solution. There are people that are working for for taking care of sloths. I work for such an organization, the Toucan Rescue Ranch, but there's also other organizations like the Sloths Institute or Sloth Conservation that are actively doing the good work of trying to work with the communities, trying to educate them, but also trying to work with the sloths. My facility, for example, deals um, with sloths that have been in trouble. So we raise orphan baby sloths and we help out electrocuted animals and help out animals that have been through trauma. And by donating to those organizations, honestly, you're doing so much to help out. But also, important as well is if you are traveling around, you have to be a smart traveler. You have to be an educated traveler. Don't go to places that will put a sloth in your arms because that sloth will die. So don't do that. Go to places where you know that they're being responsible. Investigate beforehand. Make sure that the places that you're going are not just saying, I ensure that you'll see 15 sloths in this 15-minute walk, one sloth per minute, take it or leave it, but rather that they're actually showing you what the animal is, what they are doing, and what is important to them. If somebody like goes out, if you go out there into a sloth tour, and the first thing that they say is, "Fun fact: sloths are slow," it's very easy for you to know that they don't know what they're talking about, and they're trying to take advantage of an animal in that second. So just try to be as educated as possible. Traveling and tourism is how countries like mine exist in the modern era. Without those things, we wouldn't be able to exist. But we have to make sure that we're not exploitative in the way that we are traveling and consuming a product. And that product is conservation. So when you're going to these countries, make sure that you're going to the right places. Investigate, donate and help out the places that are good, and try to stay away and steer clear from the places that are doing the bad things.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's, yeah, and it's a perfect time for this advice because the episode is like this is mid June, like peak summer. Everyone's going away on their school breaks or on their kind of like breaks from university or on their breaks from jobs and things to go on their like, yeah, their holidays, and the perfect time for that advice, I think, because it applies not just for your context, right? That's the type of thing that, like, if you're going somewhere that has turtles, if you're going somewhere that has dolphins or whales, if you're going somewhere that has any of these things that are this typical kind of photo tours or the things that like people want to go and see because they're the big headline of the area, like, yeah, go places that don't necessarily guarantee 15 sloths in 15 minutes, because that is, yeah, not probably, that's not a great sign, not a great sign at all that they're going to be finding them in any kind of ethical fashion. So no, that's a really really solid piece of advice, I think. Really really solid. And again, also, yes, with the donating, I think very very important, very very important, especially, yeah, if you have some spare change lying around, you might as well give it to a good cause. And I think, yeah, that's a perfect piece of advice. And I guess it kind of has turned the conversation now into something that, like, I kind of, yeah, while we're in the advice giving segment, I think, like, it's kind of moved me nicely onto the next question, which I have for you, which is, like, this whole series is coming out during June. It is our Pride Month series. It's about celebrating every voice in the conservation space, and also hopefully welcoming more people in and making people feel like, yeah, this is a space for you, this is a space for everyone. And so what I would have been asking all of the guests this series is, if there's someone listening to this who thinks, I love conservation, I love sloths, I love animals, I love plants, I love whatever it is, but I don't know if the space is safe or right for me, what kind of advice would you give that person who feels like they don't necessarily belong in this kind of conservation or nature space?
I think the most important thing for people to realize is that conservation, it's essentially a branch of applied biology, and we are biology. Every single one of us, every single human being that exists in their planet with their nooks and crannies and specialties and sexualities and genders, etc., they're all part of biology. Your opinion, your um, life experience, all of that is extraordinarily valuable to conservation. The idea that all of us conservationists, or most of us conservationists, are trying to get to is to be as objective as possible in our understanding of the natural world and how we can aid natural processes in a way that separates the human and animal interface as much as possible. And that can only be done by getting as many experiences, as many worldviews as possible into that space, so that we can all recognize our internal biases and create a more objective truth for the world, and in a way, in a path that we can branch out to help out our natural environment. I feel like it's extremely vital for everyone's voice to be heard, and that includes the voices of those who would be less likely to be heard, because they are giving to the world this extraordinary gift of an existence that is unlike most people's,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
I think that's a beautiful way of phrasing it, and I think it's a really, really, yeah, it's 100% true. Is that if everybody in this world has a different experience and goes through life looking at it through different eyes and through a different lens and through different things that they've grown up through or things that they've experienced, and I think, yeah, it's a really nice way of kind of summing up that point, right? Of like, we need as many eyes and we need as many perspectives on this as possible, because when we have that, like, solution problems get a lot easier when we have as many people involved in solving them as possible. um I think that's, yeah, a really nice, good, solid piece of advice. Really really good. Oh, I love this question. I'm so glad I'm asking it to everybody, because I feel like every time someone finishes their answer to that question, I'm sat here like slightly tearing up, like, yep, smashed it, nailed it, good job team, yeah, absolutely brilliant advice. And yeah, and but it does also mean, I think it also makes me like, oh, this is that's solid advice. because it means that it's now time for the final question, which I ask everybody, which is now means we're almost at the end of the conversation, which makes me very, very sad. And the final question that I've been asking everybody, as I always do, is aside from sloths, we've talked about how amazing they are, and we know, of course, you love them more than anything else in the universe. They are the one and only the stars of the show. They are brilliant. They're wonderful. But the question I ask everybody is, if you could pick one underappreciated species to shine a spotlight on for the audience, aside from sloths, what would it be that they can go away? What would be something else would be like, yeah, go and have a look at this? What would it be?
That's a good question. And the answer for me is actually very easy. I think one of the species that I work with that is extremely undervalued is American crocodiles. I know it's kind of weird, right? But
Yeah.
we go from a small folivorous arboreal species to kind of freshwater one, pretty big. The thing here in Costa Rica is that people fear crocodiles, and I don't think that's just a thing here. I think it's a thing all around the world. Crocodiles have this bad reputation that's very common with big carnivorous animals that are not very befriendable, that don't have those beautiful lion eyes, which is they're large and they will eat huge quantities of meat, and in doing so, people don't like them. Here in Costa Rica last year, we had a couple few incidents where people went into places where crocodiles have been known to roam, and sadly, they got attacked. And that's a very bad and very sad thing, but it's also a very real thing. If you go to a place, it's all about that human animal interface. You always have to be aware that the natural world is not something that occurs in our TV. The natural world is something that occurs in our real lives, and you have to be very wary. Right now, crocodiles are facing one of the worst problems associated with them in the entire universe, which is because of higher temperatures in the planet, and because of the way that they reproduce, we are getting a lot more male crocodiles than we're getting female, which means that their numbers are dwindling. And American crocodiles are actually a lot more endangered than sloths are, in according to the IUCN. And these animals, they get so little attention because they're not as charismatic as a sloth and they're not as beautiful. But I firmly believe that in the conservation space, it shouldn't be about beauty. It shouldn't be even about how interesting the animal is. It's just every single one of us and every single species on earth deserves to be able to have the right to exist. And I think that's crocodiles.
I think that is a solid answer, a very, very solid answer. And I think, yes, good job on picking two things that are like we've talked about sloths. Let's talk about something completely different. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I think what's really important that you highlighted, I think a lot of people don't know, is about how the change in temperature changes the kind of the gender balance of different species. I think is really, really interesting and important. And I think something that like when we think about climate change and the changing habitats and change of these things, people think about, right, like droughts affecting the water supply for certain species, or they think about too much rainfall if it's changed weather patterns. They don't necessarily think about what goes on inside an egg or what goes on inside like it, really, really interesting, really, really interesting. Which is a whole episode in itself. And I feel like now this is every time I'm like, okay, add that to the list of species that we need to have a full episode about. Yep, okay. No, but that is a fantastic, fantastic answer, I think, and gives people a lot to go away and think about. Um, and on that note of going away and thinking about things, that does sadly bring us towards the end of our conversation. One last thing to add is there anywhere, if people want to learn more about your work, keep up to date with your work, support your work, anywhere where they should go to kind of keep up to date with what you're doing or what Toucan Rescue Ranch is doing or what should we be doing to keep you up to date with your work?
Well, you can follow our Instagram page at at Toucan Rescue Ranch, and that way you can learn more about all the amazing animals that we save. But if you're talking about me, I also have a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Beyond the Clinic, and it's about the wild stories that vets get up to on when we are working with wild animals. And if you want to follow me, you can also follow me at Sloth Vet on Instagram, and I'll be happy to keep posting images of sloths, I guess.
Yep, brilliant, fantastic. And yes, make sure I will put links to all of those things, including the podcast and the social media and everything, in the description of this episode. So go follow, subscribe to that podcast, show it some love, listen to it, and learn more about all of the amazing things that go on because I feel like it's something that we don't necessarily think about in conservation enough. We talk about the people who do sit in labs and do things. We think about the educators. We think about, but I don't think vets get talked about enough. So I think that's an excellent theme for a podcast. And I think I love and fully endorse it. I think Um, and while you are in the description of this episode, following all of those links, subscribing to all of those podcasts, leaving nice reviews for all of those podcasts, I think that maybe you should also, if you happen to be tempted, follow us on social media, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a nice review. We are at Pangolin Podcast on anything and everything, all of your social medias, and yes, and we're on whatever streaming platform you're listening to this on. So give us a nice review on there if you are so inclined. And with all of that said and done, I think there is only one last thing to say and do, which is to say a huge thank you, of course, to the listeners for tuning in, learning more about the wonderful world of sloths with me. And of course, thank you so much to you for educating us, telling us all about these amazing things, and yes, uncovering so much more, I think, about a species that we all think we know. So thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Of course, it was a real pleasure to be here.
No, it's been about time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, and until next time, thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe because there's so many more episodes coming this month that we are so excited about. And until next time, goodbye.